Truckers and an assortment of other protesters wanting an end to lockdowns and mandates descended on Ottawa over the weekend to make themselves heard. Parliament Hill and the area surrounding it is not a novel new place to hold a protest. The main lawn in front of Parliament building has a protest on it nearly every day of the year. Bigger protests regularly spill into the streets, but to hear it from the mainstream legacy media outlets, this one is a catastrophe unprecedented in Canadian history. The media's coverage of the last weeks and continuing events will go down as a black mark on their credibility and objectivity. If further proof was required that direct government funding of the media would compromise their integrity, well, their coverage of the convoy was it. Let's start with the beginning of the convoy. The mainstream media made little to no effort to understand what these people were upset about. It's a long list, but let's try. Cross-border truckers who drive alone for days at a time are possibly the least COVID-19 transmissible employees in North America. Despite the facts, unvaccinated cross-border truckers have been banned from their own jobs with the stroke of Trudeau Jr.'s pen. Most of the media were entirely unsympathetic. Quote, truckers should have done more to prepare for vaccine mandates, experts say, read the story from the Canadian Press Wire service, published across most of Canada's media outlets. Quote, illogical for truck convoy to claim freedom threatened by vaccine mandate, say experts, read the CBC headline. The attitude of the mainstream media could be summed up as, these yokels deserve to lose their jobs if they don't comply. To them, they're just dumb, working-class nobodies who didn't get the memo. As things got rolling, one of the organizers put together a GoFundMe campaign page. While Trudeau dismissed the convoy as a fringe minority, the media was horrified when the facts began to prove otherwise. Quickly, the campaign began to rack up millions of dollars in donations. The media claimed the GoFundMe campaign was frozen, strongly implying that there was financial malfeasance. In reality, it is standard practice for GoFundMe to withhold the release of funds when large sums are donated until a plan is presented as to how the money will be spent. Not a word of this was mentioned by the Canadian Press story that ran on the CBC and most other media outlets. The most extreme disinformation came directly from the government-owned CBC. Without a shred of evidence, the network's anchor Neil Coxell suggested that the entire convoy was orchestrated by Vladimir Putin's Russia. She said, quote, I do ask that because given Canada's support of Ukraine, is this current crisis with Russia? I don't know if it's far-fetched to ask, but there is concern that Russian actors could be continuing to fuel things as this protest grows, perhaps even instigating it from the outset. Unquote. Concerns from whom? From Coxell? From her boss? Her mom? Coxell doesn't cite a single report. Coxell doesn't cite a single expert. Coxell doesn't even cite something she read on a blog somewhere. She invented it out of thin air. The GoFundMe campaign, as of this column's publishing, has raised $9.3 million from more than 114,700 donors. Some fringe minority. That is, unless you believe that they are Russian bots chipping in to foil Canada's Instagram campaign to save Ukraine. Where the mainstream media hasn't outright invented fake news, they have often done their best to slant coverage implicitly. It's hard to find any example in the mainstream media where they do not put the name Freedom Convoy in quotation marks, strongly implying that these people aren't really concerned with freedom, but instead with darker, more sinister motives. This is an exception made for the Freedom Convoy, and not protest movements favored by the government-funded media. When the mainstream media report on Black Lives Matter, they do not write Black Lives Matter. When they report on Extinction Rebellion, they do not write Extinction Rebellion. Both of these contemporary examples are decentralized movements like the Freedom Convoy, but they do not have their sincerity questioned by having their names put in quotation marks by the media. The mainstream media confidently predicted the convoy was a prelude to violent insurrection, setting the expectation that they were launching a January 6th Capitol Hill-style riot. Quote, calling Ottawa protests peaceful downplays nonviolent dangers, critics say, read one Canadian Press story that ran on CTV and most of the other mainstream outlets. Without a hint of shame in their eyes, the media's disappointment at predictions of civil war coming to naught turned towards whataboutism. You see, even though there was not been a single reported case of violence, the mean trucker's words are violence, and these hurt feelings make them so very sad. As would be expected with any large gathering of people angry at the government, there were bound to be a few bad actors along for the ride. One such actor, whom we can't tell was a man or a woman because he or she was wearing a full face mask, carried a modified Confederate flag. Now, no one could tell if he or she was actually a part of the protest or not, but the person was roundly booed and pushed out by those in attendance. The mainstream media, however, only ever reported that there were Confederate flags, that's plural flags, despite it being a single flag carried by an unknown masked man in a crowd without a single face mask in sight, to the horror of the reporters there. There was not a mention of the person being hounded out of there by those in attendance. Even more concerning was a report of Nazi flags, again plural, flags plural, despite it being a single flag carried by yet another unknown, fully face masked person at an event where the only face masks in sight were the person carrying the Confederate flag, that's flag not plural, and the media. Now, this incident raised a few more red flags, pun intended. Only 2 images are known to exist of this person, both of which gave little to no idea of what he or she looks like, and nowhere near the main protest. It's impossible to say if this brown shirt wannabe was in fact a misguided and hateful protester, or someone hoping to discredit those in attendance. Candace Malcolm at True North did a good job summing up what we know about the incident, and has offered a $1,000 cash reward to anyone who will make a positive identification of the flag wielder. Soon after, the Western Standard matched that with another $1,000, and Alberta businessman Brett Wilson topped it up with $3,000 of his own. Malcolm says that others have also come forward to chip in. So with $6,500 on the table, there hasn't been a single person in attendance at the protest who has been able to identify this person. It's newsworthy that someone would fly a swastika at a high-profile event, but the mainstream media have done their best, twisting themselves into pretzels to portray that single unknown man or woman as representative of a darker motive behind the Freedom Rally. But, as Pierre Poilievre told Parliament today, just because the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, wears racist blackface, that doesn't make all liberals racists. There's much more I can say about this by now, but you probably get the point. There's always been slanted, partisan media. It's not a new thing. But the legacy media once held it as their duty to at least present the appearance of fair and balanced reporting. They tried to at least give the impression that they didn't have a dog in the fight. Now they're little better than entertainment wrestling fight promoters. Like cigarette cartons, it's time we put a warning label on government-funded media. It's bad for the health of a free society. Algodex is owned by Algonaut. This is great new technology just coming online now in the digital currency world. Algodex is a great way for you to use the digital currency Algorand in your day-to-day transactions. Can you imagine a world where we don't have to buy a cup of coffee using the federal dollar? And you don't even have to use the American federal dollar. You don't have to use the euro or the pound sterling. You can use real money, digital currencies that are not at the beck and call of governments and inflation. The Algodex is making digital currencies usable in a day-to-day basis.